Surviving KO attacks is a mechanic in Dokkan that's been in the game for a while now. And no, I'm not talking about revival mechanics, as that's something completely different on its own. Surviving KO attacks are the revival mechanic's predecessor, the revival mechanic before the revival mechanic, if you will. If you've just started playing even semi-recently, you might not even know what this mechanic is, as it was power crept pretty quickly and became irrelevant. The effect itself was never just strong enough to be good due to how it was built. Currently, there are 4 unique units who have this effect. Those units being an SR Nail, not Call of Duty Nail, Int Jackie Chun, who is a World Tournament unit, so good luck getting him, STRA Dynamic Goku, and lastly, the Vegeta side of the Exchange Krillin and Vegeta unit. Not exactly the greatest roster ever. Nail is only an SR, so he has no access to the hidden potential system with dog water stats and contributes nothing else but the KO survival to your team. STR Rage Dynamic Goku doesn't currently have an easy A, so him only having 90% attack with no defensive buffs anywhere in his kit is quite awful. He does have a nice link set in a bunch of categories, so there is hope for him once he gets an easy A sometime in the future. Jackie Chun is a World Tournament unit, so it's basically impossible to have him with dupes, and even if you do have him rainbowed, he has a base attack stat of 10,308 and a base defense stat of 8,215. That along with only having 70% attack and defense at the start of a turn, and you start to see where this is going. The most recent unit to get this effect, and far and away the best unit to have it, is one of the free-to-play units from the most recent worldwide download celebration, Krillin/Vegeta. The Krillin side of this unit doesn't have the KO survival, but he makes up for it, quote-unquote, by having a 50% chance to dodge and OK defense. When swapped over to the Vegeta side, which actually has a pretty decent restriction of only needing 4 dodges, he does give you a 30% heal, which isn't much, but it's better than nothing. He also does stack, but keep in mind he's a free-to-play unit with very low stats and free-to-play hidden potential, so it's very slow. He then goes on to survive KO attacks when HP is 30% or more. That's just the units, however. We haven't even talked about the actual mechanic itself. So what do you get from entering the turn above the HP restriction? 1 hit of protection from dying. Yep, that's right, just 1. That's it. If you're getting attacked later again that turn, guess what? You're dead. If another unit before or after this unit in your rotation is the one that gets you killed, guess what? You're dead. I suppose Akatsuki simply thought that this mechanic was too strong for olden day Dokkan. This mechanic was supposed to deal with the Dokkan event of the OG God Lead, physical full power Frieza, and his one-shot mechanic back then, before the first year anniversary on Global, which, to their credit, was definitely an easy one-shot if you didn't use an item. Although I personally wasn't playing way back then, I still struggle to see how this would help you, as you would still die on the next hit anyway. You also have to keep in mind that this effect only works when you're one-shot. You can't just go into the turn above the HP restriction and expect to get it. For example, if you're using Int Jackie Chun, you have to be killed from above 30% HP. You can't go into the turn at 30% HP, take a normal attack that pushes you to like 25%, and then get super attacked and survive. You would still die in that scenario. Thankfully, Dokkan went on to scrap this idea, with Vegeta being the only discrepancy, in favor of the revival mechanic, which is a much harder to pull off but much stronger mechanic. Currently, only 5 units have it, and all of whom are some of the best units in the game. The revival mechanic works no matter who on the rotation is killed, with the only exception being LR Future Gohan, and it also skips the entire rest of the rotation, potentially saving you hundreds of thousands, if not millions of HP in some events, looking at you, Red Zone. It even then carries on to heal you an amount between 60 to 85%, depending on the unit, and plays a nice voiced animation, unless you're playing in English and you popped Roshi's Revival.
Alright, let's go, Master Roshi!
Now finally, the verdict. Why exactly did the KO survival mechanic fail? The main reason is that it simply doesn't do enough and is too restrictive for no reason. Dokkan has moved on to be a faster and faster paced game as time has moved on, and the more restrictions a unit has, it ultimately hurts them in the long run. Even quote-unquote easy restrictions to get, like physical Super Saiyan 3 Gokus, can occasionally be hard to pull off sometimes, since enemies usually one-shot you rather than wearing down your HP over time. Or in other possible scenarios that you could walk into the second rotation at like 20% HP, and then you have to use a healing item, but then you're unable to transform next turn. That's how it is with KO survival. The HP restriction truly isn't the biggest of deals, and is rather easy to usually have, even in the hardest of contests, and you could technically pop this effect every single turn, with units just one-shotting you instead of whittling you down. The problem is that in hard content, you're getting one shot if you're running any of these units. And even if a premium Dokkan Fest unit or LR came out tomorrow with this mechanic that could take advantage of it with no HP restriction whatsoever, any unit on the rotation would just get hit after and you die, and it does nothing good for you. If they did have the HP restriction, you would have to die over it, as I said before. You can't simply die from under it even if you start the turn over the HP restriction. It's simply too restrictive and doesn't have enough reward for meeting its conditions, and almost always will have no reward as you'll die anyway. Now, as to how they should fix this mechanic, ironically I think they shouldn't do anything and just have every unit have a revival mechanic instead. But if you were to put a questionable device to my head and ask me how I'd fix it, I would probably take off the HP restriction as it's obviously not necessary. I would also make it a permanent thing so it's distinguishable from the revival mechanic, which can only happen once per fight. But it's only applicable if the unit who has the mechanic itself dies. This is obviously a restriction which I don't like, but they've already kind of fixed everything wrong with this mechanic with the revival mechanic, and I don't want to simply make a carbon copy of the revival mechanic. I also think potentially not taking damage from the super attack would be an interesting idea, but that already exists as it's just nullification. So I'm not really sure, I'm a bit stumped. And that's everything to do with the revival mechanic. There's not really much to talk about with the revival mechanic, honestly. It's a pretty short and easy to grasp subject, but this is my first time really talking about a mechanic in a more educational format, and I thought this was a fun video to make, and I haven't really seen any other videos on YouTube talking about this mechanic and why it was bad, so hopefully you know a little bit more about it and you know why it was bad. If you have any ideas as to further mechanics I can discuss about, or anything else in Dokkan really, I'm definitely interested in hearing any comments you have inside the comments. However, that's going to be it for me. Thank you for stopping by.